Bloody Desires. Written by Johnny Fist. It's hard to breathe on a high mountain. Everyone who has ever climbed one knows this. If a person isn't adapted to high altitudes, they're unlikely to last long at the summit. But first, you have to reach it. Ethan was slowly making his way up the mountain. His breathing was steady, his movements deliberate. He wore jeans and a long-sleeve sweater, a hat covered his head, glasses shielded his eyes, and nothing more. Climbing to 3,000 meters above sea level is no easy task, and certainly not a warm one. If an experienced climber had seen Ethan dressed like that, they would have surely called him insane. The temperature alone could have killed him. But Ethan didn't care. In fact, he wasn't even aware of what he was doing. His legs carried him upward on their own, while his mind saw nothing. He only knew that he had to climb the mountain. That was all. As he climbed higher and higher, the cold air lashed against his body. A chill spread across his exposed skin. His legs grew heavier, his breathing more uneven. Suddenly, Ethan stopped. He looked to the left. In the distance, he could see the forest trees and other mountains. The view was breathtaking. If lovers of scenic beauty had reached this height, they would have taken dozens of photos. A faint bleating sound came from the right. Ethan turned his head. It was a mountain goat, completely black, without a single white patch. It stood there, staring at him. Ethan stared back. Their gazes met. There was confidence in both of them. The goat seemed to understand why Ethan was here, or perhaps it was watching him. Ethan didn't care. To him it was just an animal, nothing more, just a goat that happened to be in the same place as him, except this was its natural habitat, while Ethan was only a guest here. Ethan continued his ascent. The slope grew steeper. The goat watched him go, but didn't move. It stood like a guard, allowing a stranger to pass through its land. Ethan didn't count how far he had left or how much he had already climbed. He just kept going. If someone had asked him what he was thinking at that moment, they would have received no answer. His mind was filled with noise and emptiness. He didn't even realize where he was going. A massive rock stood before him. The mountain no longer rose in a steady incline. Now there were boulders he had to climb. Ethan jumped onto one and pulled himself up. It took all his strength, but he made it. Yet it wasn't over. More steep rocks lay ahead. Now his gaze lifted upward. Beyond the clouds, he couldn't see where he was climbing. The altitude wasn't that great, but in this part of the country, the clouds claimed the mountains as their own and did as they pleased with them. Ethan leaped onto another rock and tried to pull himself up. He didn't have enough strength to lift his body. He searched for footing to help himself. One of his sneakers slipped off, but he managed to push off and climb up. He lay there, gasping for air. He didn't turn to see where his shoe had fallen, nor did he try to retrieve it. He didn't care. He didn't even remove the other one. Ahead of him was a goal more important than anything else. He got up and continued climbing. His body disappeared into the clouds. The rocks were smaller now, with enough ledges to brace his feet and keep moving upward. He was getting closer to the summit. Climbing another rock, he stood with his legs spread wide, catching his breath. To his left, the goat appeared again. Or was it the same one? Just as black, with the same piercing gaze, but how had it gotten here faster than him? The question didn't interest him. He looked into its eyes again. The goat gave a slight nod, as if approving of what Ethan was doing. Ethan took a deep breath and climbed on. One rock, then another, then a third, and finally the last obstacle, a smooth 3-meter high rock. Beyond it lay the summit, but it looked almost man-made. For 10 meters to the left and right, everything was perfectly smooth. There was no way around. To bypass it, he would have to climb down and search for another path. But Ethan didn't have time. He didn't know why. He simply told himself that there was no time. He pulled the belt from his jeans. He would have to carve a hole, at least within arm's reach, so he could wedge the belt into it. Then he could pull himself up and stand on the buckle. That was his plan. Even an experienced climber would never recommend such a thing. The wind grew stronger, biting harder at his body. He began to cough. The foot without a shoe was freezing, but it didn't stop him. He struck the rock with the metal buckle. It was getting dark. Ethan kept hitting the rock again and again and again. Suddenly, the buckle caught in a crack. Ethan tugged on the leather belt. It held firm. He jumped and pulled himself up. He didn't even consider that the belt might tear under his weight. Hanging with one hand, gripping the belt, he searched with the other for a hold, and he found one. He wedged his left hand into a crack. It was enough to hold on and bring his feet up. The second shoe fell off, and Ethan slipped, but he didn't let go with his left hand. He hung there, suspended. The strain made his shoulder throb. He had likely torn a ligament, but he didn't care. He searched for footing, knowing he had to pull himself up and reach the buckle. From there, he could grab the edge. He found the belt with his right hand and wrapped it around his wrist, pulling himself up with difficulty. Somehow, he managed to place his foot on the buckle. It wasn't time to celebrate. In fact, Ethan felt nothing except pain in his left arm. Making sure his foot was steady, he unwound the belt from his right hand. Gathering his strength, he pushed off the buckle and reached up, grabbing the edge of the rock. He pulled his left hand free and gripped the edge with both hands. The buckle bent under his weight. With one final effort, he hauled half his body over the rock, then swung his legs up and collapsed on top. He needed rest. As soon as he relaxed his left arm, the pain flared up again, burning through his shoulder. But it barely concerned him. He stood up and looked toward the edge. Ethan had reached the summit. Strangely, it was flat. No peak, no crest. A voice in his head told him to approach the cliff, and he obeyed. Standing at the edge, he looked into the distance. The twilight light against the clouds cast a beautiful glow over everything. Ethan simply stared ahead. He didn't know what to do anymore. The drive that had pushed him to the summit was gone. He stood empty. A bleating sound came from behind him. He turned. The black mountain goat stood there. Was it the same one? Now the question had a different meaning. Had it known another path to the top? One that didn't involve such suffering? They looked into each other's eyes. It seemed that deep within the animal's consciousness lay all possible answers. For the first time since beginning his climb, Ethan realized that the goat was not here by chance. He took a step toward it. The goat stamped its hoof and charged. Lowering its horns, it slammed into Ethan with full force. He fell from the mountain. As he plummeted, he grasped at the air, but it was useless. Only then did his awareness return. He didn't understand how he had ended up in this situation, but it was too late. His body struck the sharp rocks below, an arm tore away, and his head turned into a bloody mess. He was no longer alive. All of this was watched by the shaman Kirokt. He saw Ethan's body fall from the very summit. He saw it crash onto the rocks. Then he lifted his gaze back to the peak and met the eyes of the killer, the goat. Kirokt whispered a few words, and the goat's body turned to dust. It no longer stood at the top of the mountain. No one was there anymore. Kirok approached the remains, pulled a large knife from his belt, and began cutting pieces of flesh, throwing them into a cauldron. Food for several days lay at his feet. Foolish people were to blame for becoming his victims. They came seeking answers to simple questions. They asked him to conjure a bright future or curse their partners. If a person cannot handle their own life, then there is only one path for them. The hardest path, the final path, to realize that if you can overcome and find a way out of the most hopeless situations, then you can find a way out of others. But they are given no chance to change. Kirok only gives them the opportunity to understand what they have lost. One last time, that is the price of the request. That is the price of life. He filled the cauldron with meat from Ethan's body and walked away, leaving the remains to scavengers and vultures. Fools do not deserve an easy end.